charges dismissed. While I was meeting with some of my jail clients this morning, Luigi's hearing in New York State Court wrapped up and a pretty big ruling from Judge Caro dropped. He dismissed 2 of the most serious counts, murder in furtherance of an act of terrorism and second-degree murder as a crime of terrorism. Why? The court ruled that prosecutors failed to show during their presentation to the grand jury that Luigi acted with the required terroristic intent. In other words, they failed to show that he tried to intimidate or coerce a civilian population or influence government policy. The evidence showed an ideological motive against the healthcare industry, but not the broad public intimidation that really is probably envisioned under New York State's terrorism laws. This order made a comparison between this case and a case called the People versus Morales, where that case stressed that the terrorism statutes were actually designed or intended for acts like bombings and mass killings, not really so much a targeted single victim murder like we have in this case. Now, the court also made an important point about the definition of terrorism itself. In a footnote, the judge reminded us that courts and scholars have long compared defining terrorism to like a search for the Holy Grail. In other words, it's this elusive and maybe even impossible to pin down with precision thing. He referenced Justice Stewart's famous quote about obscenity or porn, where Justice Stewart said something to the effect of, I'm not sure we can precisely define it, but hot darn it, I'll know it when I see it. So the same kind of problem exists here. We may think that we know terrorism when we see it, but the law requires a much more specific standard. Without proof that Cousin Luigi's goal was to terrorize a civilian population or influence government policy, the charges don't fit. But this order only dismissed 2 of the charges. The rest of them stand, including second-degree intentional murder and multiple weapons counts. So it's a good thing, yeah, I guess, but from a practical standpoint, it really doesn't change much. Side note, as a South Carolina practitioner, I am really impressed with this process that got us to this point in this case. The court was able to do a review or an audit of the grand jury minutes or the grand jury proceeding to make sure that there was sufficient evidence to support the charges and found that there wasn't. I like this check on the grand jury process, which is fortunately a little bit of a crapshoot show in my jurisdiction here. But well done, New York. I like it. But I digress. Now, as for Karen A's argument that the concurrent prosecution in state and federal court violates double jeopardy, the judge just flatly rejected that and said that, hey, under Supreme Court's dual sovereignty rule, the state and the federal governments can both bring charges for the same act. He also denied the defense's request for a stay, effectively putting to rest this tug of war that we've been having about who will go first, the state or the feds. So the bottom line is the terrorism charges are out, but the second-degree murder and weapons charges are still in full force and effect. And this case will move forward in New York State, while the federal case also moves forward slowly in the background. All in all, I think this is a win for now for Luigi's team. And as you will recall from earlier videos, I've been saying that these terrorism charges were hot trash from the beginning. So this was a legally sound decision by Judge Caro, I think. I'd love to hear what you think. Do you think that the prosecutors should have pursued this terrorism theory at all? Or was it a reach? And was the judge correct in tossing it? Tell me what you think in the comments below.